What's up, you guys? I'm just posting another homework help for our lesson of 7.3. A big shout out to the people who came to tutoring and who left me some good questions to discuss with. Y'all, these videos are to help you guys with the challenging problems that are attached to things. Alright, so let's get into it. Alright, you guys, we're going to review the period amplitude and the frequency. I want to first review what the amplitude is. The amplitude is the distance from the maximum and the minimum. So when you try to, represent the amplitude, you represent with the absolute value symbol of A, which is your amplitude. Absolute value means that it doesn't matter what number you're dealing with, it's always going to be positive. As again, it's the distance. The distance. The distance between the maximum points and the maximum and the minimum point. All right, so say for example, if I was to say 5 sine x. Well, if I was to say find sine x, well, the amplitude is just 5. All right. Now, if I was to say frequency, period, your period, P is going to be 2 pi because you're still dealing with the unit circle. Going back to our whole lesson of it started at 0 but ended at 2 pi, which is 360, divided by the value of b. For example, if I was to say cosine of 4x, if I would say the period is going to be 2 pi divided by 4. So 2 divided by 4, I know I could simplify that to 1/2. And that will be the period. All right. The frequency is going to be the inverse of your period. And what I mean by inverse, I mean your multiplicative inverse. So instead of you saying 2 pi over b, is going to be b over 2 pi. And p, this is just going to be f. So f is the multiplicative inverse of your period, because your period was 2 pi over b. That was your period. And then your frequency, again, is that multiplicative inverse. All right? So that's what that is. All right? So these are just definitions we talked about. The amplitude of the graph of each function is 1/2 of the difference of the max and minimum values. So I told you the key words you want to think about is your max and minimum values. I said distance. The reason why I use the word distance because when you think of absolute value is the distance from 0. But the amplitude to them is just 1/2 of the difference of the maximum value and the minimum value. So I could show you that a little bit later, how to, get that a little bit further. So here's what they're talking about, like 3 sine x. So what I mean by the difference of the maximum and minimum value, we know that the highest value of this function by putting in decimals is going to be positive 3. Well, its minimum value is going to be negative 3. That's the lowest. If you add them up, if you take the difference of it, of the maximum minimum value, you go back to the number line. So this is negative 3, and then here go positive 3. So we know that takes six little integers to get from negative 3 to positive 3, because negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2, and 3. So that's why we got 6. But then from there, because it says difference, therefore we got 3. So that's how we figure out the amplitude. But you don't have to do all of that. If you see 3 in front of sin x, guess what? The amplitude is just going to be the number in front of it. So keep it pushing, keep it going. Each function is periodic. So that means that the graph has a repeating pattern. So that means the graph repeats. Now we know from what we did in class that sine and cosine both have a repeating pattern of 1 and 0. So go back to the little chart that we did in the lesson, and you see where I'm getting at. All right. So the shortest repeating portion of the graph is called a cycle. So that's what we call a cycle. So the shortest repeating portion of it. The horizontal length of each cycle is called a period. So once it makes this repeat, that's what you call it out. And again, sine and cosine has a period of 2 pi because that's the horizontal length of each cycle. All right, so in your textbook, we didn't touch too much on your textbook, but here's how they describe everything. In general, an equation for a sine function f of x equals ab sine x, just a general equation for the cosine function for a cosine bx. In both cases, the amplitude is the absolute value of a, and the frequency, which is the multiplicative inverse of the period, is b over 2 pi. Alright, the amplitude of the distance, and this is just how they're defining it. And you see this little example, this is just 1/2. And then the period being 2 pi. And then the midline, which is something not necessarily too important, because not often people talk about, but what a midline is like I said, midline. So like for example, if your if your amplitude is 2, and then negative 2 is your minimum, well, your midline is 0, because that's in the middle of both of them, so midline. All right, I want to assist you guys with a problem that me and a student was discussing in tutoring today. All right, he was telling me there was a question that was says create a equation on the homework problem that says something that your amplitude has to be 1/2, and then your period has to be 4. Now, we struggled to try to figure that part out. We got almost every last part of the question done because it has other numbers, so we got through it. But we struggled with getting the period of 4. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So when you clean your equation, you know that your amplitude, because it tells you it's going to be 1/2, so you'll put 1/2 in front, so 1/2 cosine x. But we're not done yet because we have to get a period to be 4. To do that, why don't you use the formula for the period? Don't pay attention to this. This is a tad bit wrong. Let me block this off. I was tripping about that. Sorry, y'all. So we're going to use the formula. Period, which is 2 pi over b. Now, to get the period to be 1/4, why don't you just let b be 1/2? So that means that the period is going to be 2 over 1/2. Well, when you are dividing to to get your period, 2 pi. Again, when you divide, you keep 2 pi. You change the division into multiplication, 2 pi times, and then you take the multiplicative inverse of 1/2, and that's going to become 2. So 2 pi times 2, p equals 4. So, with that being said, our equation is going to be one half for the period, because that was the homework problem asked for, the period to be 1/2. So we got that. And they said for the period to be 4. But we use b because it's cosine bx, and that b becomes 1/2. That's how we're able to figure out our equation. So that's how you do that, y'all. And then when you put that problem in decimals to check your work, this is what happens. So our amplitude is 1/2. And then we notice that when we put this in decimals right here, our period, which is 4 pi, because that's when our y value being 1/2 starts over again. Remember, when it starts at 0.5, that's our starting point. It has to end at 0.5. So that's your amplitude. Your amplitude starts at 0.5. Your amplitude must end at 0.5. All right. To determine did you use the correct number, which we did because we chose 1/2 for B to give us our period of 4. So there we go. Our period is 4. Because again, we started at 0.5, and then we ended at 0.5, which is 1/2, at 4 pi. So bam, that should help you guys just a little bit. If you have any further questions, of course, ask me for help. All right, remember your project, the precise definition of mathematics quiz, and anything else. Now, again, we may be out for Monday and Tuesday due to the snowstorm. Please follow the protocols that I told you guys about keeping safe and keeping warm. And do not forget, because we're out of school does not mean that you are not responsible for work. So please come to my class with a sense of being prepared. You will not pass this class otherwise. And watch any other videos that have been posted. All right.